Hello, my name is Josh, and I'm a watchaholic. Welcome to Horology Insanity.
What is up, my watch friends? So check this out. Today we are going to be taking a look at this Solas Starlight. Now, this is the introductory offering from the company Solas, and it's an Irish-based company, which is pretty neat. It's their first one. They had a successful Kickstarter campaign, and like of a lot of other watches that I review on this channel, this one's sold out. Now, if you want to take a look for these, you can try to contact info@solaswatches.com. Hugh is the owner, and he is an awesome person to interact with and talk to. So I'd highly recommend checking that out. Check out their website, check out their Kickstarter campaign. But what I want to do is just talk a little bit about what this watch is. And then I want to talk about how my experience with it actually changed what my first impression was of this watch. All right, well, I want to start out with a huge thank you to Jonathan over at Jonathan T Reviews, because it was his kind generosity and introduction that allowed me to get this one in on loan so that I could do this video. So Jonathan, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. Now, the other ones that I'm going to recommend real quick are some review videos other than Jonathan's, which we'll link to down in the description. But I also highly recommend Shane over at Relative Time, who did 2 videos on this watch, one for the initial prototype and then another one with a second prototype like this is, and also Dave over at Just the Watch. Check those out. Links are down in the description, and that way you can go and subscribe to their channels and really learn a lot more about this watch in probably more depth than I'm going to go to in this video. Again, we'll talk about some of the basics, but I really want to talk about what my experience has been like. So real quick, we're looking at 38 mil on the case width here. So from side to side, 38 mil. And then it's 9.7 thick, which is absolutely amazing in my opinion. Y'all know that I love thin watches. Now, what's funny about this watch is at 38 millimeter, you'd be like, well, Josh, you got an 8-inch wrist. How did this wear for you? And I can put it on. I kept the strap off for a half a second so that we could talk about it in the Deployant Clasp that I really enjoyed. But you can see here that even on my wrist, 38 mil is usually at the bottom of my spectrum, and it doesn't wear small. In fact, I think there's so much depth in the dial with such a thin fixed bezel that it wears closer to a 39 or 40 mil. I'm going to be honest with you, before I put the calibers on it, I thought it was a 40 mil watch, just experiencing it, just throwing it on my wrist. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And 40 is like a sweet spot that everybody uses. I was actually surprised to learn that this was 38 mil, but it is. So take that for whatever it's worth. Lug to lug right here is 44 millimeters, and then the lug width is 20. So all of your standard straps are going to work with this. Of course, it comes with this leather. I can suspect there's pros and cons to this. I really liked it, so I think that the pros outweigh the cons, but we'll talk about that in a little bit later in the video. Let's talk about the 2 most important aspects of this watch. And these are, in my opinion, of course, somebody else could have a completely different opinion of it. But for me, this watch is about 2 things: the dial, and when we flip it over, the Micro-Rotor. Yep. So we'll talk about this here and more in a second. Let's focus first on the dial. Check back in my next video, because y'all know that I like Aventurine dials. I actually own 2 and have 2 in my collection. And the next video is going to be comparing this Solas side by side with the Zelos Horizons V1 Timekeepers Edition Aventurine dial, and also with the Balticus Stardust with the Aventurine dial. But that's the whole reason I wanted to check this watch out. The Micro-Rotor is cool, don't get me wrong, but I really wanted to see this dial. I absolutely love everything about the shimmer and glimmer that this gives you in the different light. I absolutely love the depth of play that you get when you look at this. And I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes I just go outside at night for no reason whatsoever other than to look at the stars. Now, In full disclosure, as a Christian, I also sit out there and pray, and I'm reminded of the fact that, oh man, the God of all creation created that, and the enormity of what we can even start to begin to see in the galaxy only speaks to the fact that the God who created that has to be even bigger and better and more amazing. But yeah, when I look down at this, I see the night sky, and I think that that's really fun and playful. But let's talk about some of the specs of this watch before I start talking about my experience with it. This watch does have 50 meters of water resistance. It does have a sapphire crystal with AR. It does have a signed crown, which you can see there, right? And it's not a screw down crown though. So like many dress watches, right? You're not going to want to go swimming with this. You're just not going to. Now, the cool thing other than the dial is this movement. And let's talk about a little bit about this movement. The only con that I could think of for some people is the fact that it doesn't hack. And for those who don't know, hacking a movement just means that when you pull the crown out to set it, it will stop the seconds hand so that you can set it accurately, like you were trying to set it to exactly match the atomic clock or something like that. So this doesn't do that. You can see on the front, it's got this small seconds down here at like the 8 o'clock position, between 7 and 8. So when you pull the crown out, and I'll do it now for you, and let's zoom in on it, you'll see, let's zoom in. Okay, I can now move. Oh, that's the first position. So you can see I'm changing the date. If I pull it on the second, I can now change the time, and let's get it off of that beautiful logo. But you'll see that even in the out position here, the first and second position, the seconds is still running. And so that's what we talk about when we say it doesn't hack. But for me, I don't mind it. I don't. And I say that as someone who has OCD, right? On watches that hack, I tend to make it so that it absolutely matches the atomic clock, because I keep an atomic clock in my bedroom that syncs kind of every night. And then, as y'all know, I've got like my G-Shocks and things like that automatically set. And so for those that have it, I got it. But when I'm wearing this, it never bothered me. I think it's because I liked all the other things about the watch that I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, doesn't hack, doesn't bother me. I kind of feel the same way about this date right here. We can talk about that real quick. I kind of wish it didn't have a date. Personal opinion. It may, that's going to be different for every single person, but the depth of this dial is so beautiful. And when I compare it to my Horizons and my Balticus, you're going to notice they do not have dates. And I kind of like that, and I wish this didn't have it. Now, I will say that being that the date is right here at the 3 o'clock, being that they did a black date wheel, right? It's a lot more subtle. I think the initial prototype had a framed date window with some silver edging, kind of like the way the small seconds has that silver edging. They removed that. And from everything that I can tell in the other videos and pictures of it, it was a good thing. It was a good thing that they removed it, because the white lettering on the text is still evident and you don't really need it. And it doesn't take away from the dial, which the shine of the silver date window edging, I think, did take away from the dial. Now, what's cool about this is between the date here at the 3, the awesome kind of shiny Dauphine style hands, the small seconds being over here kind of on the 7 and 8, and then the pretty large and prominent logo right here at the 12, even though the dial's got like so much going on, it feels somewhat balanced. Like, it really feels like, I don't know, that there's not that much. When I was wearing this and when it was on my wrist, I really did think I was looking at the sky. Like, my eyes, even though I could tell the time in most lighting conditions, there's no lume on this, right? But the Dauphine hands are shiny. The indices are just big enough, right, where you can tell them. But I never had a problem telling the time on it. But my eyes never looked at these silver accents first. My eyes immediately went to the Aventurine and the dial in the background, and it just kind of soaked me in. So I don't know if that's an experience that I have because I have other Aventurine watches and that's kind of what I enjoy, so my eyes naturally gravitate to that. But it's funny, even as I'm sitting here filming this right now, that's what my eyes are doing. I almost have to refocus to see the hands to tell the time, because when I glance down, that's just not what my eyes are looking at. With that, let's talk a little bit more about the movement. Aside from it not hacking, the main thing is the Micro-Rotor. Now we can throw in a screenshot real quick of what a normal see-through caseback looks like with an automatic movement. And you will notice that the rotor, unless it's super duper skeletonized or something or decorated, the rotor is going to take up half of the view window and it's going to block half of the beauty of the decorated movement underneath it. And so I actually prefer hand wind watches with see-through casebacks, just so that I can see the movement work and all the decoration on it without the rotor being in the way. This Micro-Rotor tries to do a little bit of both, where it gives you the convenience of having an automatic that you don't have to wind, but it allows you to see so much of the movement and of the decoration that when you put a good sized see-through case back on a watch like this, it really pays dividends. Like, this watch is stunning all the way around. Now, y'all know that I've got like my Zelo Sky Raider, and that's one of the ones that I like the most and I use to compare to this. It's got a huge see-through case back and it's got a beautifully decorated hand wound ETA movement. And so I often will end up taking my watch off, looking at it in the back, kind of like I'm doing with this one right now, and I just kind of enjoy the watch working. I just do. But when you have an auto with a rotor, I don't know, it takes away from it. And so I think that this Micro-Rotor is really cool. I'm hoping that this becomes more of like a standard. I'm hoping that more people will latch onto this Micro-Rotor at an affordable price, because mind you, you can get Micro-Rotors, but usually they're in way more expensive watches. And so even though these are sold out, let's talk about it real quick. These sold on Kickstarter between 329 and 399 euros, which it just depended on how early you backed it on which price you got. That comes out to about $389 to $471, which for what you're getting in this fit and finish and this kind of package, I think that's a hit. I do. It's reasonably priced. It's right in there with, you know, your Zelos and your Borealis and all of these other micro-brand watches that have kind of a sweet spot there at or around $500. But you're getting features like the Aventurine dial and like the Micro-Rotor movement that are really in watches 10 times this price tag, which is pretty neat. So considering I think that was a goal of DHU when he was designing this, when Solas was putting out this watch, I think that was a goal of theirs, and I think they hit it out of the park. I really do. I think this is a home run. So anyway, with that, this is the Hangzhou 5000A movement. It beats at 28,800, just like a bunch of other standard ones do. It's got a 42-hour power reserve, which is pretty common and standard across the board, until at least you get into some of the new ones with, I don't know, the silicone springs and stuff, and they're trying to get upwards of 80-hour power reserve. But 42 is pretty common, so it's good to see that in here, and I think that'll suit most folks. And yeah, I think the one thing about it all is there's a 2-year warranty on this. And of everything that I've experienced from DU and in my interactions with him, I think that he's going to provide great customer service in the long run. So I do think if you have any issues with this watch, reach out to him and he's probably going to get you taken care of and squared away. I get the full impression that DU is a watch enthusiast, and that's awesome, because when watch enthusiasts come out with designs, they're usually better designs, because they're doing the types of things that we all want to see and that we've all come to appreciate and kind of enjoy and love. And that's been my experience with this. So let's talk about that real quick before we wrap up this video. My experience with this was, I saw a couple of videos about it, but I specifically latched on to Jonathan T reviews, and I talk to Jonathan pretty regularly, kind of in private message and whatnot. And so I just kind of asked him and said, hey, Jonathan, is there any chance that I could find out more about this watch or about loaning it in to the channel so that I could do a video on it? And I specifically had the goal in mind. I wanted to compare this Aventurine dial to my other Aventurine, which will be coming up in the next video. And so he was nice enough. He introduced me to Dehu. Dehu was more than gracious and more than kind, and he had one sent over as soon as it was available. Now, Shane had mentioned in one of his videos that I think he had like 14 prototypes that were floating around. So that might have played into my favor as far as Dehu's being generous. It's not like he just had one that was floating around, right? But in this case, my little tiny channel still gets to enjoy this watch, and I can appreciate that. Now, my experience when I opened it up was meh. And I don't know why. I've been thinking back on this, and I've been trying to contemplate, like, why was my initial impression so different than what my impression of it is now? And I think it's because I'm a little spoiled, both in the fact that I have a massive collection, but also in the fact that I'm on a ton of tours and loaner watches, and I've got just friends who also have massive collections, and we're constantly passing around watches to one another. And I think that that just played into the fact that I can sometimes be a little desensitized to watches. Now, it's not to say that I don't enjoy a bunch of watches, but part of that too is something's got to really stand out for me to attach myself to it. But aside from that, when it came to this watch, again, I kind of had the side motive in it, but when I received it, I was like, eh. Other than doing the Aventurine comparison, I didn't think that I would want to like have one of these in my collection, much less surpass, my appreciation that I already have, like for my Zelos and for my Balticus. And it has. And that's what's interesting about this. My experience with this watch was, thankfully, I got to experience it for a while. I actually wore this watch, and it was wearing it like nonstop, which, y'all know me, sometimes I change watches like 3 times a day. No, I actually wore this watch nonstop for like 2 weeks. And that did it. The overall weight, it's like 68 or 69 grams, right, on this leather with the Deployant Clasp. But that thing just kind of disappeared on my 8-inch wrist. The fact that it's 38, I didn't even know. When I was wearing it, I thought it was a 40, and I never once thought that this was too small. I absolutely adore the Aventurine and the depth, and you'll see that even now, depending on how I get it in the light or not in the light, it plays, and sometimes it goes fully blacked out. Sometimes you get it like right in the light, and it'll look like, as Shane said, I think he called it a blue disco ball. But most times it's just playing in the ambient light around you, and it's got just a little bit of a shimmer or a glimmer effect. So all of that, I just really, really enjoyed this watch, and I can now see why they sold out. And I think that if Solas wants to keep at it, I think they could really be successful. His attention to detail on this watch and on everything that he's put into it, it's fantastic. And I say that as someone who has OCD, right? So yeah, attention to detail, it's here. And I can appreciate that. And Dehu seems very welcome to receiving feedback and whatnot, kind of like Zelos does, right? They do iterative improvements on that stuff. They put something out, they get feedback. The next one, they account for that feedback. We can see that even in the 2 prototypes that were done. The first prototype, he took feedback, he came out with the second prototype, and it was updated. So Dehu, if you happen to be watching this, please keep at this. And I think you're going to be a success. I really, really do. I think this one's already a success, and just keep doing what you're doing and keep taking that feedback and making the improvements. And I really look forward to having one of your watches in my collection. In fact, I'm kind of hoping I can get one of these, even though they're sold out. I'll have to see what I can do about that. All right, my friends. Well, that's what I'm going to do with this one. Check back in the next video. I'm going to do some comparisons against different watches, both with Aventurine dials and with kind of like a 38mm sizing variant, so that you can see those in 2 different aspects. And then the video that I'm going to do after that, I really want to talk about this leather strap a little bit more, but more importantly than that, I want to talk about this Deployant Clasp, because I have had both good and bad luck or bad experiences with Deployant Clasps, and this one was fantastic. So I want to talk about what made this one so great and what made some of my other ones, specifically a Seiko that I had on a cream dial Alpinist, why it was not very good and not very comfortable, at least for me, and I can talk to you about why that happened. All right, my friends, so with that, we'll call this one a wraps. Until we talk again, please remember what really matters, and that's not watches. Keep the insanity sane.